During those 2 years that I spent in the army, I had a lot of boyfriends. The Israeli army is co-ed. We basic training and even afterwards. And we ate all the soldiers, male and female. We ate in the same dining area. When we were in basic training, it was only the women alone. But I don't know, a few feet away, there was another group of soldiers who would do their exercises or whatever it was they did. The whole camp was full of male and female. So we had our own living headquarters, but it was very close to the men. I mean, it was extremely co-ed. There were about 10 of us in the dormitory, 10 women, and not much further away were the headquarters of the soldiers, the males. And so, needless to say, there were a lot of romantic relationships going on, and freedom, a very healthy freedom. And it wasn't like everybody was constantly sleeping with everybody and having sex. There were really deep relationships developed, being so close to one another. So I always saw that the army was a very healthy atmosphere as far as becoming good friends with one another or having deeper relationships with one another. That whole scene I found very healthy. I always did. I always thought so. Okay, those 2 years, I had many, many boyfriends. There were two that I must speak of that were more than just casual boyfriends. The very first one happened not to be a soldier. Now, I met in Netanya when I used to. Actually, I met him before I was even in the army. His name also, by the way, is Maurice. Well, that's right away something in common with my stepfather. I met him when I used to visit my family in Netanya while I lived in Tel Aviv. Him and his parents and sister lived not too far from there. They also originally are from Brussels, Belgium, but I didn't know them there then, of course. And I can't recall the exact day I met Maurice. This particular one, I don't remember how we met. It could have been at the beach, it could have been in the street. I just have no recollection. But a very strong relationship developed. And eventually, when I was in the army and he found out that it was right so close to Netanya, I saw a lot of him at that time. We had a very strong love affair, in quote. I know we liked each other a lot. Sexually, of course, we functioned very well, but then I always did with everyone. And that's because of my very good teacher, Maurice, my stepfather. So Maurice and I, we had a lot in common. The only thing he had in common with my stepfather was his name. That's really it. Of course, that would have been enough. He also happened to be very attractive. And he was a fabulous dancer. And I always loved dancing. And he was a lot of fun to be with. We got along fantastically well. We were both a little kooks, a little crazy. Very energetic people, very enthusiastic people, and we saw a hell of a lot of each other. And his background was wealth. His parents were in the textile business, and they had a lot of money. In fact, they immigrated, but in a way that Maurice never had to go in the army. He was about a year older than I. And their immigration papers were like it's hard to explain. It was a 3-year trial period, so that him and his sister, who was older, they never had to go to the army. I can't remember the exact word it is that exempted them from going to the army, but they didn't have to. And his father had opened a small factory of textile in Netanya, and that's where they lived. Anyway, Maurice and I got along just fabulously well. And we went to a lot of dances together, and we always won trophies dancing, and it was really a great period. The relationship lasted 6 months on a very high scale. We were very, very close. And I will come back to him in a minute. When it cooled off a little between him and I then met a soldier. I had many affairs with soldiers in the army, in the same in the same base where I was. But toward the end of the army, the last 7-8 months, I met a soldier there who he dealt with trucks and cars, the garage, the mechanics end of it in the army, in the same camp where I was. And his name was Motka. He originally came from Poland. And of course we spoke Hebrew to one another. Him and I had a much deeper relationship than anyone I've had up to that point. Even more than with Maurice. The Maurice from Netanya. It got to such a point with Motka where his parents lived in Haifa. And many weekends I would go with him to Haifa to spend the weekend there. And his parents, his brother and sister-in-law lived all together in that same small apartment. And I was always very welcome there. They treated me almost like their future daughter-in-law. Things were very, very serious between Motka and I. And we were talking about marriage already. And I was actually engaged to him. So, I'm trying to put this in the right order. The 7 months that we were together, that we lived together as such in the army, whenever we had any time, we would be together. He was a wonderful guy, gentleman, a fine person, and we loved each other. Well, I don't know what love is really. I thought I loved him. I probably did, but I always had that ghost, Maurice, my stepfather. He stopped me from ever completely giving of myself, because I know that Motka loved me. I know he wanted to marry me. It was like a fait accompli that we one day would be married. And toward the end of my army years, in other words, I was 19 and a half, I visited Haifa often, and his parents really thought I was going to be their future daughter-in-law. But at the last second, I completely chickened out. What had happened was, there was only a few weeks left of the army for me, and he had to remain another 6 months. For men it was always 2.5 years. And I remember telling Motka that I'm not sure that I know where I'm at, that maybe I should first go back to Belgium. That feeling was getting stronger and stronger all the time, where I knew after I finished the army at the age of 20, I have to go back once to Belgium and see my mother and see where I was really at. I was quite mixed up in a way. It's whenever I visited his parents in Haifa, I could see the struggle that went on there, financial struggle, economic struggle, and I don't think it was consciousness. I was conscious of that, but that there's a very good possibility that scared me. To get married to Motka in Israel would mean a very tough, hard life. Israel was very, very poor at that time. It was so new. And I guess I was afraid. I was just afraid of the poverty. I was watching the way they were living in such small quarters, such togetherness. I mean, the rooms were so tiny. They struggled so hard. It just scared me. It really scared me. So I remember talking to Motka at the end of the army, toward the end, and I said to him, you know, I'm going to go back to Belgium. I'm going to write to my mother to send me a ticket to go back to Belgium. And once I'm there, I'll really know where I'm at. And I know I'll come back for sure to Israel, and then we can get married, and, you know, everything will be fine. But I said, I must go back just once. So he said, Motka, I remember, said, you'll never come back. Once you go, you'll stay there. You'll find life easier there. And he realized I wasn't really it wasn't any more question of Zionism. It was a question of real deep feelings for Israel. And as much as I loved Israel, which I always did, I loved the people, that everybody was Jewish was fantastic. I loved the language, the customs. I loved everything. It's just that I was just scared to get married under those circumstances. And I thought I was still young. What was my rush? And if I had remained in Israel, there was no way out of it. I had to marry Motka. I mean, we were in love. I know I did love him. I know he loved me. I just had to have another chance. I couldn't just settle down. So that was the part, that was the discussion I had with Motka, trying to make him see that I must go back just once. And then I can always come back and we can get married. Right, that was Motka's story. It was a very strong love relationship that lasted about 7-8 months. That's toward the end.